Okay, so I was going to do a really elaborate intro like I did last time with like props and special effects and stuff. But I couldn't find any like guns or anything that would look like an extreme 90s super character. I do have a library of gun effects and stuff that I use for animation, but I couldn't really find anything that was especially on such short notice that was worthy of really being in the video. So today, we're reviewing Bloodshot, which comes out tomorrow. Comes out Friday, and I just so happen to have the first appearance of Bloodshot for some reason. Really don't care for the character. I don't think he's particularly interesting or compelling or anything like that. I think it is extreme 90s exploitation. Like, it's exactly what you'd expect it to be. Like one of those sort of trashy indie books that was just exploiting like the coolness, like the extreme blood and guns and muscles, like Rob Liefeld aesthetic of the 1990s comic book boom. But this cover looks really like unprofessional. This looks good. This is like a perfectly flat thing, but it has the perception of depth. But this artwork itself is really bad. Like, it's not quite symmetrical or anything. Obviously, the gun looks stupid. He's standing on nondescript machinery. But not just that, this looks kind of unprofessional, don't you think? It looks like somebody did this digitally, but they didn't know how to, like, crop out... they didn't know how to crop out the black, or the white background. So they just sort of plastered it on there. Instead of making these black points highlighted in white and making this go away completely, because this looks really unprofessional. It looks like something like a youth pastor or something would whip together on like Photoshop, or not Photoshop. They don't know how to use Photoshop, but on like Microsoft Paint, and sort of plastered on over like an inspirational image and a quote, and printed out as like an invitation. And there's lines across the printed out paper and everything. This looks unprofessional to me. Maybe this was the intent artistically, but to me it just strikes me as unprofessional. But as you'll find, that's kind of a theme with the art in this book. Also, this is sort of, oh, this is glued on. This is not, is not part of the cover. It's like they couldn't shell out for like an actual cover made of this material, whatever you want to call this. So they just cut out a piece and sort of glued it somewhat asymmetrically onto the comic book. Seems a bit cheap. And that's fine because it's an indie book, but if you can't do the gimmick properly, don't even attempt to do the gimmick. I feel like I just realized, oh my god, look at that. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, you should get that looked at, man. Oh my goodness. When you mess with genetic mutations, you know, things can go wrong. Look, this is Aladdin when it wasn't a soulless cash grab. So let me point out the art in this book. And I have the Valiant era collection here. And as you can see, I've made some bookmarks of interesting points of art in this book, because I wanted to compare the art in Bloodshot to the art in some of the other Valiant books. First of all, the coloring is not great. It's perfectly serviceable on this page. But throughout the book, you'll find, I think, that the coloring is really not very good. And there's tiny, precise bullet holes in these people's heads. Somehow the trajectory was such that it could get through her head and through his head, even though they're shown as being like completely different heights, like entirely. And then he sort of like shrinks down all of a sudden to meet her so that this can happen. It's like the artist didn't have a layout. They didn't know what they wanted to do until they started drawing. They're like, oh, this would be cool. And so that so that happened. But yeah, so Bloodshot shoots them. The faces are not great, but they're serviceable. Bloodshot shoots them, and then he comes in. Presumably he was not far away here, because he would have been mid-jump, I think, during that shot. And he shoots this guy, point blank. By the way, the line of shot does not perfectly line up with the blood, but whatever. He shoots this guy and his fucking head explodes. Also, what are those for? What purpose could that possibly serve? Anyway, so he's an extreme 90s character with blood in his name. But look at his gun. His gun is absolutely massive, and it seems to be like a fairly standard police issue pistol. It's absolutely gigantic. It's like the size of his forearm. So I took some bookmarks, of course, but I wanted to point out the blast here. So he gets shot in the arm, and it's like a little speck, which is fine because he's like genetically enhanced and whatnot. But then he shoots this guy. So he's much further away at this point. He's at least like 10 feet, right? At least 10 feet, probably more. It's hard to tell because the proportions are really bad. It's hard to tell precisely what the scale of everything is. But he shoots the guy, and it has an even bigger explosion than the fucking last shot he took. So first of all, he's shooting little pinholes in people's heads at the beginning of the book. And then he's doing this at point blank range, right? So it's the size of like, it's roughly the size of his ear, the explosion, which is pretty big. But then it's like the size of, it's like the size of the middle of his back, and it blasts right through him. And then he does the same thing to this guy. So it's like, what is this weapon? I do appreciate the details of the blood on his boots. And this looks quite good here, I want to point out. The art on this wound looks pretty decent. But the art is really strange, man. It's like, why are there cars moving? He's coming out. Okay, so he jumps out of the airport window. It's about 2 feet from this car, but it appears to be like several lanes of traffic are moving across, but there's no like determined like lanes. It seems like they're going willy-nilly, and that'll be a theme in the book. You'll see that again in a couple pages, I think. It's very strange. You can see like there's people in them and they're driving, but they're like scattered. They're like 2 feet in front of the airport. Like, what are they doing out there? Yeah, so here we go again. Here we go again. He's laying on top of one of the buses we see. But again, what are these lanes doing? What what is this? This is an accident. This is like an insurance issue happening right now. Look at these converging lanes. Like, what the absolute shit? Where's he gonna go? Where's this guy gonna go? Like, what the hell? I don't want to be too hard on this book because it is an indie book, but at some point you gotta take a minute and try to work out what you're doing spatially. Otherwise, it's a really bad storytelling. Now this is a pretty decent. This is a good drawing. It's not like something you'd see as an establishing shot probably at Marvel or DC most of the time, but it's not bad. It's definitely serviceable. And the colors are really good here in this shot. I really like the way the colors are used here. This is really weird. But yeah, so all that's perfectly serviceable. Bloodshot looks like a completely different person here, despite the fact that he's only missing his hair. He appears to grab the doctor and sort of crush him. By the way, the story's serviceable in this book. I really don't want to be too hard on this book. I try to find things that were good about it. I will say, I did have some fun reading it. I wouldn't call it a particularly good book, but I will say it was tolerable. Like, I wasn't wanting to die the whole time, like I am with a lot of these 90s extreme exploitation books. But yeah, whatever. Also, this guy doesn't explode like he did earlier. So this is a thing you'll notice throughout. Also, what was that there earlier? It's hard to say, because you don't really see the inner wrist of Bloodshot. Okay. So you don't see his iris up until now, so I'll give that a pass. But I can't really see this serving much use to somebody who has super strength. Like maybe if you were trying to get out of bonds or something, you could use it. But he has super strength, so I don't suppose that would matter. But this sword knife thing that he uses, this will change size drastically throughout the entirety of the book. It's pretty silly. But I assume he's powered down here. The art, again, is perfectly fine for the faces and whatnot, and the suit looks good. This feels like it would happen, like when he bunches up his arm. That's perfectly fine. Let's show off some of the art here. Oh, yeah, so he can interface with technology. So he takes, like, a CD, and he puts it into his stereo, and he touches the stereo, and somehow he's able to, like, interface with it such that he can interpret what it is that's on the CD through contact with the stereo. It's like, okay, whatever. But this looks quite good. The coloring in this scene is quite good. I like that a lot. But over on this page, again, the blood looks really weird in this book a lot of times. It looks really pinky at some points, and it looks really red at other points. But what is this? So he comes down in a swinging arc. He chops his head off. He chops his head clean off. So he comes down from here. His arm is up, right in front of him. And then he chops his head off. His arm is in the way. He's like standing on that side of him, and he swooshes down. So his arm should have come off, but it's just his head. So again, it's really like bad storytelling in terms of like being able to tell what's going on in fluid motion. This face reminds me a lot of a Steve Ditko face, actually. But like, what the hell is going on? So he's holding his sword like that, and then he flings it back. Like, how do we get from here to here, first of all? But he like swings it backwards somehow, because his arm seems to be fully extended. It's like if you took your arm and you tried to like push it behind your back to cut somebody. I don't imagine that would go terribly well. But he takes out his massive gun and blows this guy's chest apart again. The gun is not lined up at all with the actually, hold on. It's stuck in here. The gun does not line up at all. So it's pointed at this angle. It doesn't line up at all with the wound. Put simply. But what's even worse is he like swings his arm back and chops this guy's fingers off. So his blade should be coming from here. So it should be going like this, right? Through his fingers. How did his thumb get involved with this? How did it get cut off at the nub there? How are you getting this and then like that? He's swinging backwards. So it should go through his fingers, but his thumb shouldn't be cut off like that as well. And what happened to the bottom of the gun? Did he chop the gun in half? Because the bottom part of the gun is completely missing, and it's not drawn to look like it's cut in half or anything. It just looks like it's gone, like it's disappearing into another dimension or something like that. It's very, very odd. And we get a poster, which is nice, I guess. It's the same as the cover, but everything's like it's not a very good. They really like to show off this image, but it's not a very good image. So then the lighting changes completely somehow from scene to scene again. Yeah, like this is a $4.25 book in 1990, like what, 2? That's more than comic books cost today. Comic books are like $3.99 Canadian and American. Back then, this book was $3.50 American and $4.25 Canadian. It's like, that's a pretty high expectation. I understand that independents need to make money, but that was not a problem in the early 90s. Like, if you made a book with any recognizability at all in terms of people drawing or writing or anything, at a company like Image or Valiant or anything like that, you weren't in trouble financially. It's just a fact of life. But yeah, so the lighting completely changes again, and these two like other Bloodshot type folk come after him, and his knife, of course, completely changes size again. It's the one he's still holding, by the way. So it looks like it could be the other knife, but both knives are unsheathed, and he hasn't switched blades. Like it's clearly the same one he was holding earlier. So it's like, what are you doing? First, where did his little knife go? Because it's clearly not in its sheath. And why is this so wildly inconsistently in shape? Like that's a butter knife, what he's holding there. It's about twice the size of his hand. Like it's not the sword he was holding before. Also, what is he planning to do here? Is he going to block it with his wrist? So they grab him somehow, and they turn him around and throw him off the dock. They seem to charge and jump at him, even though, like, that's the opposite. They push him off the dock in the complete opposite direction than they were coming at him from. And it appears to be, like, this is a concrete dock. The dock they push him off here is wooden. And so he drops his sword, which is now a completely different size again. It's now about the size of his torso, maybe a little bigger, into the ocean. And remember, he doesn't have his other knife in his holster, in his sheath. But then, all of a sudden, he climbs up, nothing's in his hand, and then he's got this knife out of nowhere. Where did the knife come from? Like, it didn't come from his holster. He appears to be reaching behind him. But the knife was not in his holster. It's just here all of a sudden now. I've been going on for way longer than I thought this video was going to last. But I keep noticing like these really stupid things in the book. Okay, so... okay, you know, I'm just going to move on because I'd be here all day. But they chain him up. And I wanted to point out how great the coloring is on this panel right here. This is excellent coloring. That's really, really good. And the, I think the colors are like offset. They've got like a bit of, like a off-kilter, like classic 50s 3D, 50s to 80s 3D style. And it really works, I think. It makes it look like it's sort of fluid and underwater. And the coloring is really, really nice here. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. That is an excellent panel. I think everything there really works. Aside from the sheen, I don't really know where the light's coming from there. It looks good. I don't really know where the light source is coming from there, because it's nighttime and they're underwater. But, so basically he taps in to the nanites in their bloodstream, because he can communicate with his nanites, and for some reason they're tuned to the same frequency or whatever, and he's able to, like, control their blood, which is cool, I guess. And he makes their blood pump faster and faster until their brains explode. Not their hearts, their brains. Their brains explode. So in theory, they could have done that to him, too, at any point, but whatever. So he does that to them. This is a really cool panel. Or this is a really... It's not even a panel, it's a splash page. This is a really excellent splash page. Everything there is very competent and nice. And for the rest of the book, the art's perfectly serviceable. But the story's really shallow and kind of like generic and not tremendously interesting. I was entertained enough through the book to like warrant me finishing it. But only because I had to do this video. But I want to show off some of the art. I've got notes here. Little sticky tabs. So this is Magnus Robot Fighter. This is some solid work in terms of coloring and line work. Everything looks really solid except for his foot over here, which for some reason is like super long, like longer than his calf. So the camera keeps going out of focus here. But yeah, there's some solid work in Magnus. It gets a little weird once in a while. I wanted to point out Dr. Solar here. So Valiant Comics was really a mixed bag in terms of consistency of artwork. So here, they appear to be only a couple feet of... Jesus. Sorry. Solar and this guy appear to only be a couple feet apart. A few feet apart. Maybe 3.5 feet. Right? And you can tell that he's bigger than him. Right? He's bigger than the guy with the black jacket. But then he's standing like a foot away from him at this point. And he's like fucking dwarfing him. Look how tall Solar is in this panel. He's absolutely massive. And then in this panel, he's still like within... First of all, they change positions constantly. They're all over the place. But so they completely turn around, and then Solar sort of lifts up a little bit, but he's still right in front of them. And he looks really small by comparison. Like, first of all, what is that flight pose? It looks fucking ridiculous. But his size and position are incredibly inconsistent, which is really, really obnoxious, and it does not make for very good visual storytelling. And that's something you wouldn't see in Marvel or DC, or at least not back then, with the exception of Rob Liefeld. I wanted to point out the art here. This is Eternal Warrior. This does feature Bloodshot as well. This is like solid A material. I can imagine in the 80s and 90s seeing this artwork in Marvel or DC Comics. Like, this looks like Animal Man artwork. This looks like Swamp Thing artwork. It looks really, really good. I've seen Batman stories with very similar artwork. I can imagine seeing this in DC or Marvel in the 80s and 90s. This is really, really solid stuff. The coloring works. It looks really good. So, like, I don't know, man. Valiant, in my opinion, is a mixed bag. When I was talking to cartoonist Kayfabe at Decaf, they were talking about... Piscor was talking about how Valiant was really lame and fucking really boring and stupid. And I disagreed with him to some extent. He's right, but I wouldn't put a blanket statement. There is some good stuff in Valiant. I wouldn't call myself a fan of Valiant, but I do enjoy some stuff like the art in Eternal Warrior. I like Magnus, Robot Fighter, and whatnot. And there are some books that are genuinely quality in that publishing house. But overall, he's right in that, like, there's some real garbage. There's some stuff that just doesn't hold up. Despite the fact that there were other much smaller comic book publishing companies at the time that were putting out consistently higher quality work than Valiant was. But anyway, this Bloodshot video has gone on for way, way longer than I thought it has. So I'll catch up with you guys later. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.